Hello, I'm reporter Julie Spencer, and I'd like to welcome you to Newsline, Iowa City. Please join me as we move along the cultural corridor during Black History Month and tour the African American Museum in Cedar Rapids. The museum's education director, Erin Thomas, will talk about the museum and take us on a tour of the museum's latest exhibit, an Iowa coal mining town founded at the turn of the century, Buxton, Iowa, the black man's utopia.
The African American Museum of Iowa started over 10 years ago, supposed to be a Black History Month display for the youth in the church just up the road. They realized that a lot of the youth in their church did not have a good idea of African American history, particularly that of Iowa's African American history, so they just decided to put up a display for the month of February, and it caught on. And pretty soon, before you know it, this display outgrew the church basement. It outgrew the building next door to the church. There was space at Westdale Mall for a little while. Finally, we got to build our own buildings. We have expanded well beyond what was first anticipated. We were severely impacted by the floods of 2008. So since then, we've spent about 6 months rebuilding. We're finally back in our building and we're open to the public again. We have one temporary exhibit right now about the town of Buxton, Iowa, and we'll have another temporary exhibit joining it in April. By December of 2009, we'll have our new permanent exhibit installed, and it should be fantastic. As I said, this is an exhibit about the town of Buxton, Iowa. The town doesn't exist anymore. It's a coal mining town from the turn of the century. It started around 1900, only lasted about 23 years, and currently it's now farmland in south central Iowa. It started out with coal mining. There was some union issues, and the coal miners had gone on strike. The coal mining companies decided to bring in some strike breakers from Virginia. They were newly transplanted coal miners, were typically either African American or immigrant. They bring in all these strike breakers to start working in the coal mines in Iowa, and because African Americans and immigrants would have been facing the same types of discrimination, all of the coal miners were treated virtually equally. When they got to Buxton, it would have been virtually no racism, which is very, very unusual for that time, particularly in a place like Iowa where there's not a lot of African Americans. It was a pretty unique place. They called it the black man's utopia. And as a part of this exhibit, we have some hands-on interactives. These are always fun for the kids to play with when I have student groups come through. So we've got some coal down there so you can tell what it actually looks like if you've never seen it before. Some of the tools that you would have used as a coal miner. This is the carbide fuel that you would have used in your mining helmet to light your lamp. And it's very messy. And I should say the techniques they used in the coal mining in this particular area, it was called Roman pillar mining. So it would have looked a lot like having pillars in the middle of the mines. The coal would have been very difficult to get out of the rock, so the only way to get it out, as far as I've ever seen, was to blast it out. And we've got several lamps here that would have been pretty similar to what would go on your mining hat, your helmet. You can tell from the hat it was not a hard hat, so it would have been less protection than we would have today. We've got the carbide, like in the big tank, only this is a smaller one you could carry around in your pocket, and several different kinds of lamps. You see on the front of these, most of these are open on the front, so you'd have an open flame on the front of your head. This section of our exhibit shows you what the town would have been like. We've got different sections for different stores and businesses, and all interspersed throughout the rest of the exhibit. You'll see photos of the archaeological dig they did in the 1980s. Iowa State University did the excavation. Since the buildings were falling down, there were a lot of foundations and half brick walls, but a lot of it was under the soil, so they had to dig it up and find clues as to what Buxton was like. So we've got the company store. A lot of these photographs would have been donated by families who had lived in Buxton. In Iowa, there are still lots and lots of families who are from Buxton originally. So there are a lot of families around Iowa who still have photographs, who still have stories about what Buxton was like. Even if the photos aren't from the families, we get the information about the photos from the families. We've got the YMCA. The one in Buxton was not just the place where people could go to exercise. This was also a place where those transplanted miners from Virginia would have a chance to do some adult education classes. In Virginia, they probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to school very much. So when they got to Iowa, this was a huge opportunity for them to become educated. In the doctor's office, one of my favorite photos of our whole collection is this one right here. It shows the town's doctor, who is an African American. I love this photo because they all look very professional, but the point was that just because he was African American, it didn't limit him from becoming a professional. He was well respected in the community. He was paid the same amount that any other doctor would have been paid. So it was a very unique place for African Americans. A lot of opportunity here they wouldn't have had anywhere else. We've got the clothing store, a couple other businesses. It's just to show you, again, African Americans were not just limited to coal mining. We have black lawyers, black doctors, store owners, very professional types of jobs that in any other community they may not have been able to get. This is some of the ironworks they found on the archaeological excavation. So this would have been a decoration for one of the buildings. I believe it was on the YMCA. Again, it's just all of these fancy, beautiful pieces to the town that made Buxton unique. Most coal mining communities, they call it a coal mining camp. So there's a reason for that. Usually coal mining communities are built to be temporary. They're not built to be structures that last for a long, long time. These are quality built homes. They're buildings that are nicely built and they're meant to withstand the time. We've got an actual town, not just a camp. Another reason Buxton's unique. And of course the church would have been very important, as it is in many African American communities. It's sort of the hub of activities. Buxton had many churches. And then the Buxton School, which, because it was in Buxton, again, was very unique. Most of the time in this era, in the early 1900s, schools would have been segregated in many other places, but not in Buxton. We have white children, black children, children of immigrants, children of residents. We have all of these kids all being educated together in one group. When you get back into the town itself, you're going to see a whole lot of homes. And like I said, these were homes that were built to stand up to time. They weren't temporary homes. So when Ben Buxton decided that he was going to build these homes for the people in Buxton to help keep residents in Buxton, he wanted this to be a real town. He figured these real homes would be a great place to start. Actually, this vignette over here is modeled after one of the homes in Buxton. It says here on the text panel, it says Dorothy Neal was born in Buxton in 1906. She's the little girl over here sitting on her dad's lap, right next to the doggy. Her father was a tailor and a member of the Buxton Wonders, which was the baseball team. The family moved to Cedar Rapids in 1916. In the 1980s, Dorothy worked closely with Dr. David Gradwell of Iowa State University in the archaeological excavation of Buxton. Dorothy was able to remember many details of the town and her family's home. This setting is based on her description to Dr. Gradwell and his research colleague, Nancy Osborne. These descriptions of material culture by Dorothy Collier were significant to the archaeologists in scientifically understanding how former Buxton residents lived. And again, there's a few more archaeological artifacts they discovered in some of this home site when they did the excavation, just to show the kinds of materials that would have been common in people's homes. This is the more modern part. So we've got life after Buxton. The town of Buxton only existed for about 23 years or so. As you can imagine, it started to decline when the coal started to run out. So the families who worked for the coal mining companies started moving down the line to the next town, the next coal site. Buxton, even though it was supposed to be a permanent town, was starting to lose a lot of its residents to the coal mines down the line. When the residents started moving out, The businesses started moving out as well, and pretty soon there was no more Buxton. A lot of those professional African Americans from Buxton, when they moved out of the town, didn't have a lot of other options. Because Buxton was so unique and had so many opportunities for African Americans, they didn't have those same opportunities when they moved to other communities. The African American Museum of Iowa is a statewide museum, so we offer programming around the state. There's all kinds of information about that on our website, www.blackiowa.org. If you want to come and visit us, our hours are 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Saturday. We do guided tours, self-guided tours. We often have educational programs, usually at least one per month. In February, of course, we have more for Black History Month. We also go out to do programs in the schools. So if you're interested in having a workshop in your classroom, we can do that too. We even do distance learning classes through the ICN. So there's a lot of ways for people in Iowa to learn about our African American history, even if they can't make it to the museum.